Good evening. Today is Tuesday, September the 24th, and we are having a cross-examination debate tonight. The resolution is driverless cars will be the norm in 20 years. Our first speaker, the Prime Minister, is Danièle.
Mr. Speaker, fellow debaters, and guests, be it resolved that driverless cars will be the norm in 20 years. Let's start with some definitions. Driverless cars. Cars having the functionality to be driven autonomously. For example, as in an autopilot. Will be the norm, meaning being common, usual, expected. And we are so confident in our arguments that we'll go even further than that, and we'll say that greater than 50% of all kilometers driven in North America, whether it's road transportation of people or goods, will be the norm. In 20 years, that means by the year 2033. Cars are a wonderful invention. It shaped the way we live, the way we spend our waking hours, even early in the morning. It decides what type of holidays we're going to have. It gives us the freedom to explore our surrounding beyond the radius accessible by foot or by horse carriage. The revolution in the middle of the 20th century was that a car was accessible to anyone, not just the very rich. Anyone that wanted to have a car could have a car, and most of us did. Therefore, my points will be that driverless cars will be the norm in 20 years based on 3 points. Technology, safety, and the fact that driverless cars will be a commodity. My colleagues will expand for longer-term benefits that are related to the environment and how government will leverage these new inventions. My first point, technology already exists. Driverless cars, in the definition that we provided, doesn't mean no driver, because something needs to drive the car. But it is a series of systems that is intelligent, always attentive, and a co-pilot whose skills are there to provide safer ground transportation of people or goods. It's a function that can be activated to assist the driving and enhance the skills of the driver. Modern vehicles are already highly computerized, and some already do things like park themselves. Oh, I wish that technology existed when I passed my driver license. It would have made my life a lot easier. Currently, there are already 20 different types of cars that are considered driverless, and that's just in North America. How does it work? It works with a multiple number of sensors, extending the range of information that a driver can process, as well as the speed of processing that information. There will be vehicle-to-vehicle communication and all kinds of geolocalization, like OnStar, for example. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know about cruise control, assisted braking, and the much publicized assisted parking. car manufacturers, Mercedes-Benz, Nissan, Toyota, Ford, and software companies like Google are actively doing research in that area. Just the Google cars have clicked in 483,000 kilometers without an accident. Now, my second point is safety. How do we value a life? And really, it should be in economics. I would like to talk to you more about these reasons, and I will do that in a few minutes. I don't want to invent the future. Okay.
Danièle, stay here. Thank you, Danièle.
Thank you.
And now to cross-examine Danièle, Dante.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to the government for a few seconds, and I'll get right back to my arguments. So let's get started. Thank you to the government for that unfortunately cut short speech, but let's get right to the brunt of your arguments for now. I have a couple of questions for you. So you were mentioning that we will have technology that will replace the driver in 20 years or less?
Yeah. I submit that cars can be functioning without a human person driving the car.
Okay, that's fine. But then why did later on the government go ahead to say that technology can assist, can co-pilot, can enhance the driver? I thought there wasn't any driver. Is there a driver?
There will be a person in the vehicle.
But is he a driver?
The person will be assisted by the vehicle to drive themselves.
So then he's driving? Is he driving or not? Yes or no?
There is a person that is transported in a vehicle, and part of the journey may or may not be assisted by some of the software or equipment in the vehicle.
I don't get it. Assisted, replaced. I don't understand the government's point with where they're trying to go with the replacement.
About
no, that's fine.
Computer-assisted drawing. It's the computer.
Right, but
doesn't
computer-assisted. I'm sorry, not artistless drawing. I'm sorry. Thank you for that. Next question is you were going to mention about how there's already 20 types of cars. There's 20 types. Are you sure about that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. How many different operating systems are there for these cars?
I don't have the details.
Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. All right. Let's get started. The opposition would like to put in your minds today that, sure, it would be great if we had, all sorts of awesome things, but in 20 years, we do not believe that driverless cars will be the norm. And let me just go ahead and tell you why. So there's problems. There's problems with every single thing that we try to make. Even if we're trying to make the world into a excellent, peaceful society, we will run into problems. And the opposition believes that we'll run into societal, into legal, and technological problems as we're trying to transcend our driver dominated roads and such. So as the government was trying to get to, their definition is that we would have common, usual, and expected scenario where these are the types of cars that we're using. I'd like to say that I would not like to be in a place where we expect the cars to drive for us. Why is that? Because we currently have full control. The government was mentioning that the car was a wonderful invention that gave us freedom to explore outside of our radius. Well, at the point where somebody else is doing the driver, we lose a lot of the driving. We lose a lot of that freedom. We become passengers which limits our freedom to explore. I mean, I agree with the government. The car is, sure, it's a sport, it's an art, it's a way of life. We've heralded it as the revolutionary invention of the last decade, the last century. But to remove that freedom from the car, is it still going to be that great invention? And furthermore, to take us from that driver's seat into like a passive position, I mean, who's really in control at that point? What's to stop the car from deciding things on its own? I mean, like right now, you can choose the most effective route to your workplace using data that you have collected yourself and you can reason through. But at that point, it's going through data that it collects from thousands of other users, choosing not a personalized path to you, but one that it has already collected from like the other users. Now, that being said, collecting this data is, in my opinion, it could be a problem in of itself. Like the freedom that the government is trying to allude to is severely limited by the type of surveillance and data collecting that these types of cars would do. Would you install a beacon that tells people exactly where your car is at any moment? That tells a company that develops software where your car is at any moment? I mean, already we're having trouble with the NSA looking into smartphones without like permission, and we have trouble with insurance companies demanding like black box data in order to settle on a court case. Like it's that sort of privacy concern that we think is one of the societal obstacles to achieving that following goal. And I mean, how much trust are you willing to put in a car that you can't hold anyone accountable for? That leads to my next point, the legal issues, like accountability. I mean, the buck has to stop somewhere, right? In Australia, there was a cruise control incident where a car would not stop accelerating constantly for 20 minutes. The driver had to get on the phone with the police, and the police basically had to clear roads for him. After the nightmare scenario was concluded, the car was sent to the company, who then sent it to an independent investigator to find out what was wrong with the car. The results were deemed inconclusive, and no one was held accountable for that accident. No one, not the driver, not the company. It was kind of those, what is going to happen? That's the kind of issue that we want to prevent. I mean, right now, Google in California, those somehow thousands of kilometers have been under their jurisdiction, and they've already had 2 accidents. They've published the accidents themselves, and both of those accidents have been by human error, and in both cases, the human was not held responsible, but rather the car company. The car company that did nothing was held responsible for a human error of a car that they made that was being driven by someone else. Like, why? Why is this fair? Is it fair to the company? Is it fair to the people that are driving the cars? We don't think it's fair, and we think these sorts of issues are going to provide obstacles so that we don't get there in 20 years. Finally, like we have adoption problems with technology. I mean, everything from like the problem of sensors that are mentioned. Like, do you know that Google has stated that they're already having difficulty driving through snow terrains and signaling? My partner will comment more on these points. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dante. And now to cross-examine Dante, please welcome Michelle.
Hello, Mr. Leader of the Opposition. I have a question for you, several. Do you have control issues? Would you say that you're a person with control issues? Problems,
not at all.
Problems with freedom? Problems with lack of freedom?
I enjoy freedom.
You enjoy freedom?
Yes.
But you're okay with control? We have full control right now over our cars.
Indeed.
Is that what you're proposing?
Definitely.
And we have the freedom to control our cars.
Yeah.
And you're proposing that the government, that the pro side are you suggesting that we want you to give up the freedom over your own controlling your own environment?
I mean,
It's a stretch, I think.
right.
So I'm asking just for some clarification,
You
please.
do lose control, and when you lose control, you lose freedom.
Some people would argue differently. A passive role in deciding things on your own. I believe that's a direct quote that you had. So it's a passive role. You're in the car, trying to imagine you, or person B, to remove it from you, wanting to go to Dominion, Metro, to get some groceries. So say, car, take me to Dominion, or program it in, however that communication occurs. How is that a passive role?
Well, from that point, you're placing your entire trust in the car, and you have no more input until the car decides that it's done.
But right now when I get in a car, I put almost entirely, my entire trust on the rest of the drivers. And I don't know what they've been eating, drinking, consuming, smoking, snorting, fixing.
The driver loses the control. The driver loses the freedom. I'm arguing for the driver's
But they don't know what I've been snorting, drinking, smoking, eating. Those other cars.
The driver doesn't know what
Yeah, none of us do. We don't know what's going on.
And how would a computer know that?
No, I'm saying a computer doesn't have to spend any attention on that.
And
Another
how
question
is that
you
better
had
than
just
the
at
status quo?
just at the end. Well, that's my question. How is that bad? How is that worse than the status quo? Car companies. You mentioned this Google car. 2 accidents, 500,000 kilometers. Thank you. We have to end our conversation. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. 500,000 kilometers this Google car drove around in Las Vegas. 2 accidents. 2, both related directly to human error. If that doesn't make the case for the government, I don't know what is. You have 500,000 kilometers. How many of you have driven 500,000 kilometers? Have you ever nicked anything? Have you ever opened your door and accidentally bumped something? Anyone care to admit it? Perhaps you haven't admitted it to your insurance company, but I would argue, ladies and gentlemen, the government would argue that something's happened at some point that we're embarrassed about. Be it resolved that driverless cars will be the norm in 20 years. 2033. The technology, as my colleague, our esteemed Prime Minister, has already stated, the technology exists. It exists in terms of sensors. Sensors around the car. It exists in terms of video cameras, infrared sensors to sense when people are walking. They can sense when there's a dog walking beside the car, and they know to stay X amount. It's programmed in, but they know to stay away from said dog, said human. They can be sensors, not right now, but in the future, we have 20 years after all, that will dictate where the lines are on the road. Imagine that. You can drive up the road and the car will stop and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be driving at midnight and have somebody on a bicycle dressed in black without a flashing light swerving around because they've been at the pub all night. You don't have to worry about that because your car will know where the motion is and your car will know where the person is. And you can just drive home. In the car, you can be transported home. We have some arguments. Just after painting that picture for you, we have some arguments. So our Prime Minister has talked about the technology already being there. She mentioned 20 cars that already exist driving themselves. BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Cadillac, Audi. Carnegie Mellon has something on the go, as does Stanford University, Virginia Tech, MIT, the VizLab electronic driverless van, the Eureka Project, Volkswagen, Stanford has something on the go, the Spirit of Berlin has something on the go, as does the autonomous taxi cab, General Motors, and of course the infamous Google. Toyota talks about 5 different sensors that are available in a car in order to make it autonomous. 5. 4 are already in practice right now. In the 1951, we saw a change in driver with power steering. We want to talk about adoption rates. Let's zoom into that one for a little bit. Adoption rates, 1951. Within 5 years, power steering was on most of the cars that GM produced. That's power steering. Let's fast forward to computer adoption, because this is a lot about technology. So if we look at PC adoption, that took a little bit of time, arguably about 20 years before everybody had a computer on their desk. Then the next one we look at, the internet. How long did that take before we all had it on our desk? 10 years, shall we say? Let's taking out AOL and their crappy service. 10 years? Let's zoom forward. Smartphones. Smartphones took what? Another 10 years? Add in social networking. The combination of smartphones and social networking zoomed that up by 10%, 10 times the adoption of PCs. We like technology. If we want to look at other products, we can look at electricity, we can look at refrigerators, microwave ovens, color TVs. They make our lives easier. We like them. They come down in price. We buy them. What we're proposing right now is a way to simplify our lives, and it's going to be affordable. In 20 years, these cars, France is undergoing a huge employment program. Francis Hollande has got a program in set to address employment issues in France. Renault and Nissan are the 2 manufacturers. They're going to have driverless cars on the road in 10 years for $15,000. That's very affordable. If we look at a driverless car, the average person, the average car, through our research, can sit 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people, but the occupancy rates are only 1.5. The cars don't have to be as big as they are now. Once we shrink down the cars, we don't need as many parking spots. We can have more parking spots in the same area. We can have more cars on the road. We can have a better quality of life. And that's what we're proposing, is a better quality of life in 20 years, which is completely attainable. Machine-to-machine technology, vehicle-to-vehicle was mentioned. That's sensors talking. This does not have to be about collecting how much you spent at Winners. This can be talking about York Street on a Tuesday morning, traffic jam at York and Front. That can get transmitted. Boom, we have a new traffic grid. This technology is around. It just has to come into the cars and then come into our lives. Another really big opportunity is for transport cargo. Imagine 3 or 4 Mack trucks on the road, one driver, one human being, but the rest being driven by the autonomous procedure. And this is in practice right now. And that moves transportation quickly and efficiently. Ladies and gentlemen, you have no choice. Vote for efficiency. Support the motion.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And now to cross-examine Michelle, please welcome Margie.
Thank you, Michelle. I found it telling that you wound that up with the words, "You have no choice." I thought that was pretty interesting. Have you ever had your computer crash?
Sorry,
That's
okay.
okay.
Yes.
Did you die?
No.
Okay. How many people do you know who've had computer crashes?
Several.
Have they been maimed or otherwise incapacitated when they did
You're
crash?
fully supporting our argument. No, they have not.
Okay, so
And
when
just
you're
like if a car crashed, they could still, the car computer system went down, I think you're going here, they would still survive. Good point.
So when the computer crashes the car, because computers crash, you can be maimed or killed.
No, that's a real, no.
So you're saying that the computer would never crash?
No, I'm not saying
Never?
that at all.
It would never crash.
I didn't say that.
It would never cause an accident where someone would die or be
Goodness,
maimed.
the two of you have control issues tonight. This is interesting.
Certainly do. I don't have a problem with that. Where's my flying car?
Where's your flying car?
My
Did you
flying
order
car. I was promised one in the 50s. It was going to be around in 20 years. Where is it?
Oh,
It's an awesome idea. Flying
were
cars
around
would be
in
so
the 50s?
useful. Well, you know, I put in a hold early on, prenatally. I was anticipating.
Who did you order it
Because
from?
I
Did you
was
order it from
promised.
Mac?
I read all the books in school. It was going to happen in 20 years, and it was going to be awesome.
Okay.
Where is it?
Well, it depends on where you ordered it from. Is the
Okay.
manufacturer still around?
So what you're saying is that this would actually simplify our lives. Who do you know who can still work on a car?
Oh, lots of people, actually.
Do they work on a modern car or do they work on an old VW?
They do both, because I have a lot of computer friends.
So they have to be a computer tech to work on the car, not a mechanic anymore.
On my car?
A car.
It depends on the car, of course.
Okay. I see. So what you're saying is that a crash with a computer driving the car is somehow safer than a crash with a human driving a car. Sort of interesting, actually, because if you actually think about it, even now, hacking is a problem, possibly with cars. It was demonstrated recently that in the Pittsburgh security firm hired a couple of hackers who were able to take some 2010 models of cars and hack into their braking, steering, seatbelts, lights, horn, speedometer, and gas gauge. They were able to do this either through a port beneath the dash that mechanics use, or through cell phone, or Bluetooth, or even a CD player. Okay, and that's now, before we have a fully autonomous car that's completely controlled by your computer. Imagine the problems with malware and hacking should we turn that over completely. Do we really want to put our 3-year-old alone in the car with the possibly compromised computer system and send it on its way without a driver? Really? Even in the places where we allow driverless cars, we must have a licensed driver behind the wheel. We've had autopilot, including auto land, for planes for more than 20 years, and yet you still have 2 pilots, 2 licensed pilots, 2 when you get on a plane. Why? If we've got a computer that can do the whole thing, why do we need them? because they're not so infallible that we can actually remove the licensed driver from the equation. Sure, they can assist, they can be helpful, they can add additional input, but social acceptance is going to have a ways to go before we turn over the whole thing. Would you get on a plane without any pilots on board? Would you get in a car or put your loved one in a car that didn't have a licensed driver behind the wheel? Even in a few years, yes, lots of progress, but I think before we will turn it over to the robot overlords, we're going to have a little bit of resistance, and I'm going to suspect that's going to go for more than 20 years. Sure, increased help and aid with the actual licensed driver, but you're still going to need one. In fact, in the latest polls, in the UK, only 40% of people polled were willing to consider letting a car drive itself with them in it. And in the US, only 20% would accept. And those numbers go down if they have to pay extra for the technology. As my partner has made clear, we're not exactly thrilled with having people track us anyway. I mean, Facebook aside, how am I going to conduct my extramarital affair if all the computer companies know where I'm driving at night and my wife has hired a hacker to check in and see exactly what's going on and maybe steer me away from that poor moral choice I've made? And then finally, the thing that I think I want to clarify here about the legal issues. Human error caused some of the accidents. Now, actually, I've looked it up, and a lot of the accidents that have happened with driverless cars have been caused by the computer. They're not all human error. But in order to be allowed to drive at all, there had to be legal liability agreements that any accident that a driverless car was involved in would be the fault of the driverless car. It's the only way they could get them insured and on the road. Okay? So now we have a real liability conundrum. If there's an accident, who's at fault? The navigation provider, the manufacturer of the system, the person in the car? Insurance companies aren't thrilled about taking on liabilities they can't quite identify, and I don't think the manufacturers are exactly lining up to be liable for any accidents that will happen. So I think that that's going to take a lot of time to sort out in itself. So we have looked at predictions with cars before that have not come true. Fuel cells, all the rage 10 years ago, right? Fuel cells. George Bush made a big speech. The US government put $1 billion through fuel cell technology. Where is it? They gave up. Well, they haven't totally given up. The government gave up and cut off the funding. So these predictions, especially this far out, is pretty dicey. We've been going to have nuclear fusion power in 30 years for the past 60 years. So trying to span out and say it's going to be normal, it's going to be regular, that means replacing most of the cars on the road with these cars, and they will be driving without a licensed driver behind the wheel? I'm thinking it's unlikely. So we don't deny it's a great thing. As my partner said, we all want awesome things. But I don't think this is going to happen in 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margie. And now to cross-examine Margie, please welcome Danièle.
Now I'd like to appeal to you and to all the parents in the room. Why in the world would you send a 3-year-old alone in a car? Really, what kind of parent would be that irresponsible?
The kind of parent who thinks that a car without a driver is safer than a car with a driver?
Most of the cars have, most of the cars accident happens because of human error. Most of the fatalities, in fact, happen during dimmer light or at night. And if you had a vehicle that had sensors that could amplify all of the signals, all of the information that is required to drive safely, I submit that it would be a safer way to be in a car. And
is there a question in there somewhere?
why? Well, you talked about privacy. Do you have a credit card? Do you have a smartphone? Do you have any way to become totally invisible from? You're already relinquished. So why would you stay in an unhappy marriage? And that's the question.
Are you asking me about my life? I will say that I use a lot of blocking software on my computer to make sure that I'm not tracked. And I have that control.
So are you in an unhappy marriage?
If only. No, I'm not in a happy marriage.
There is a survey that says that 60% of the U.S. Population would be comfortable with a driverless cars. That was done by Cisco in May 2013, and it was a survey not just in the U.S. but a survey on 10 different countries.
How did they
what do you
define
have?
a driverless car?
Thank you. And now with his 2-minute summation, please welcome Dante, the Leader of the Opposition.
So, we were promised today 3 arguments to support the driverless car. Having only heard promises and vague mentions of how life would be better, I did not see any clear evidence that the obstacles that the opposition presented would be overcome at all, even if in 20 years. I did not see a direct response to the fact that these obstacles create huge concerns that have to be resolved before we can even think of adopting this new technology. Truth be told, I too would like a flying car, or driverless, either one. But without addressing the issues and thinking magically and childlike imagination, I mean, where does that leave actuality? It's sad to see a government acting as irresponsible as to institute a plan of action with little base on reality. These issues have to be contended with, and I believe that we can do it. We can do it, but we must not rush into this. We cannot say in 20 years. We cannot put out a plan that fails to address issues as concerning as the legality of driverless cars, the issues as contentious as the safety of unwanted operation from malicious contenders. Without addressing issues as hard-hitting as those, is what we have is a society that moves forward with its due course and builds on the past to deliver a safe and a completely cohesive experience for driving.
Thank you very much, Dante. Danièle.
Life has a high value, and we spend a lot of resources these days to extend our lives and to improve the quality of life of people. Driverless cars is just one way that we can make roads safer for both passengers and pedestrians. Most fatalities are preventable, and driverless car will help us do that. Therefore, it is perfectly reasonable to assume that driverless cars will be the norm in 20 years. Please vote for the motion.
Thank you very much, Danièle, and that concludes our speakers and our debaters. And now we will hear from Dave, our adjudicator for this evening, with his ideas on this debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, this is a fun debate. This is the first cross-examination debate of the season, and I love cross-exams, and there's lots of potential for interesting drama, and it delivered, so thank you, debaters. I was thoroughly entertained, so that's a win for everyone as far as I'm concerned. But here we get into the actual scoring. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the different sections of our scoring. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the arguments. So first of all, as I think we can tell now, there was some pacing problems from the government side. I did hear a really great setup. I'm going to talk about 1, 2, 3. My partner's going to talk about these things. I thought, great, I'm all ears, and I only really heard about 1. So that was a shame because I could tell there was a lot there. So not a great start out of the gate from the government. The government seconder followed up that, filled the gap very nicely. Lots of material, lots of content from the argument side. I've got a lot of clear arguments that were well explained, and then they were then hit on slightly by the Prime Minister in the summation. So that was encapsulating the arguments there. So not too bad, but I had to average it out. So marginal from the government side when it comes to argument sides. When it comes to the argument score, the opposition. Dante came out with a couple of clear arguments. It was a little bit difficult to follow where one argument began, one argument ended. So I got your arguments out of them. So I've got, and they were good from what I found. And then secondly, the opposition seconder, a lot of good arguments, much clearer. I could really tell where they were coming from, and they all kind of fit into the same pattern. So all in all, it was quite well done. The summation really only hit a couple of those, so it didn't really get stitched together very well at the end. So the argument it was all kind of nebulous and all there, but really wasn't stitched together, and there wasn't really a nice like focus. So that was satisfactory towards the outstanding area, but more satisfactory. The content rage, this was a bit, it was quite broad. There was content in this debate, but it wasn't the kind of content I was expecting. I didn't hear that this is what this study expects the adoption rates to be. In particular, the government sector did a great job explaining this is the adoption rates, like about 10 years for this, 10 years for that. And I thought that was great, and like I was really missing. Like what if like Facebook has said this is how fast they're expanding or something, anything, even one, just say something solid that this is where this number comes from, because I really wanted to see that, because of course it's all the technology came from today. We want to see what happens in 20 years, any kind of figure that shows me something, but you came the closest to delivering the branch. The opposition, really good content from the opposition seconder. We had a lot of facts that were relevant and directly linked to those arguments, and really only one minor point from the leader of the opposition about the Australia 20-minute acceleration. That was the one piece of evidence I found in there. So it was good. Lots of room for improvement from both sides. So just get that content in there. Watch an educational on how to prepare for debate on our YouTube channel. Rebuttal and refutation. This is really where it all came down to, because it was a cross-exam debate. So much of the time was spent in the heat of it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in each section here. I was a little bit concerned that sometimes cross-exam, it kind of runs away from you, and you have to be a little worried about contradictions. And I did hear a couple contradictions in the middle of cross-examination from the government, and I didn't hear any contradictions from the opposition. In fact, I heard the opposition point them out. So that was good from the opposition side. And but in general, I thought most of the debaters did handle their questions quite well. There was some finesse. So from the government seconder, I'd say there was a lot of finesse, well handled. I really enjoyed watching that exchange. However, the Prime Minister, the questions and answers weren't really targeted. I thought there were a lot of missed opportunities. So some room for growth there, but that's great. There was some used time there, so that was good. The leader of the opposition did a great job by hammering back to his original points and getting the questions, like being very insistent on the mark, going back to defending individual freedom. I wrote down here good hits, so that was great. And opposition seconder handled herself extremely well under questioning and during questioning. I wrote on target, it was excellent. Your questions about is there a question, and the last thing that you got in just after the timer, which would have been a really great contradiction, not a contradiction, a rebuttal. There was a study about 40% UK, 20% US are happy with driverless cars, and then almost in the 11th hour of the debate we heard from the government, oh, but it's 60%, and then you came back with the questions like, oh, but what's the definition? It wasn't finished, but that's kind of what I was thinking anyway, so it was undeveloped content, and I think you hammered on that in the 11th minute. That's not an expression. Anyway, so that was, but it was great. The cross-examination, wonderful to watch. Teamwork, this is the next section. So difficult to tell the teamwork from the government side because of how much short the first presenter was, because there was a good setup, but I have to say it was an awkward follow-through, because then the poor government seconder has all these extra things to talk about, and I couldn't quite tell where the teamwork would have come into play. In contrast, the opposition, I could tell they had a unified strategy. I could tell where their arguments were coming from. The cherry on the top of that would have been to tie it all together with the summation. So again, I have to come back to that because the summation is really where you address your points again. And I'll make the same comment to the Prime Minister because you didn't mention a large percentage of the government secondar's points, and that would have been time to kind of capture, like, no, we really did have a strategy. I did remember she was going to talk about those things. So opportunities for growth for the leaders in that point of view there. Last section here is style and rhetoric, and so we're going to hear a couple of the same things again. I will say one thing I really enjoyed at the beginning was I heard we are so confident we're going to go further, and I thought that was great stylistically, but then we had some pacing issues, and then even when you ran out of time, you tried to keep going, and you have to stop, especially when the speaker's standing there. You have to stop. And Michelle, government seconder, I thought your tone, your pacing was excellent. You had so much material in there. I thought your little bit of an attitude can be tinged just a tiny little bit towards the professional when responding to some of the comments during cross-examination. But that was really the only thing I could say. Otherwise, that was an excellent presentation, excellent style, good example. And Dante, leader of the opposition, sometimes in much the same way that Michelle did a good job with her speed, I thought your speed needs to be tempered back a little bit because I had a little bit of difficulty following at some points. And also, you have a bit of a wandering feet a little bit. Plant yourself behind that podium and stop moving. That's it. That's the only suggestion I've got. And the final thing I'll say for the opposition seconder, a very strong, complete presentation. Excellent. So here's the final score. The opposition has won the debate with a score of 59, and the government has received 32. So, and the best speaker is Margie. So could I please see the leader of the opposition receive the motion? Thank you. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Dave. Excellent adjudication, as always. A very interesting debate, and we have a score in the popular vote of 6 and 6. Oh! So, as always, the speaker has to cast the disparaging vote. So, I will vote for the opposition.
Very good.
And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our debate this evening.